I recently did a video on how lots of sports car and luxury car manufacturers are starting to make SUVs in line with what Porsche did with the Cayenne. And a long time ago I did a video on cheap luxury SUVs that you can buy for under £20,000. So I've obviously had SUVs on my mind a lot recently, so I thought I would do another video on cheap luxury SUVs that you can buy for under £10,000 instead that look way more expensive than they actually are. How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another video. Now I know that not everyone who follows my channel is a fan of SUVs, but they are the single most popular type of car in the world right now in terms of sales, so I thought I would do a video on SUVs and obviously give them some love. Even though I myself, if I was going to buy a family car, would always get an estate instead. If you like this video and want to see it under £5,000, I've already planned that video, so all you have to do is get this video to 1,000 likes and I'll make that video as well. Don't forget that I'm in the UK, so prices in other countries might be different, and whenever you buy any second-hand car, maintenance, repairs, insurance, road tax, all that good stuff is important to remember. If you're new here, do hit subscribe to stay up to date on my 2 videos every single week, but without further ado, let's get into the video. I'm going to do my absolute best to speak mostly neutrally about every car on this list, but I really can't pretend that I'm a huge fan of the first car we're going to talk about, the Range Rover Evoque, a luxury crossover SUV which appeared as the production version of the Land Rover LRX concept car, though I do think the LRX is a little bit cooler looking. It has many engine options, including a 2.2 litre inline-4 turbo diesel which produces 147 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in a lowly 10.3 seconds, but of course 0 to 60 isn't really what this car or any of the other cars on this list are all about. The LRX was actually a very impressive concept by Land Rover, with an insane level of technology thrown into it and a core focus on making a car that was competent off-road and still efficient, practical and relatively lightweight for the roads. This concept led the design of the Evoque, which is why even though the car is still relatively big, it weighs 1,670 kilograms, which isn't actually that bad when you compare it to its competitors in the SUV space. If you're after one, as is always the case with Range Rovers, there's a set of trim levels you can choose from, and Prestige is the spec with the most focus on luxury. So I go down that route if you want maximum comfort, and I would say the interiors on these are pretty lovely. Irrespective, you'll get a car that is actually very capable off-road, way more capable than a vast majority of people will ever use them for. I was lucky enough to be driven around an off-road course in one by Land Rover, and it is very impressive what they can do. I've mentioned before this car was actually designed by Jerry McGovern and not Victoria Beckham, who seems to have accidentally claimed she did design it, and when she tried to sell her own special edition after putting just 1,400 miles on it, the dealership sold it for just £55,000, dropping the price from the £80,000 asking price they originally put it up for, as it wasn't selling. These start at around the £8,000 mark for very well used examples, so for 10k you'll still be looking at a 2012 example with around 100k on the clock, and it's worth noting that this is the newest car you'll be able to get from this list. Build quality is known to be a problem with these, and it's the electrical failures in particular that have let owners down. There are also some known gearbox problems, and you're not out of the woods there. Some owners have had catastrophic engine and suspension failures too. I don't have enough time in this video to go through a full rundown of the problems, but check out on forums or on one of the online buyer's guides just to see how aggressive these can be in terms of issues. Taking fourth is the Mercedes GL class, which is a much more traditional full-size luxury SUV that isn't quite as cool in my head as the G-Wagon, but it's far more affordable, with prices starting at around £5,500 at the bottom end, and for 10k you'll be looking at getting a 2009 example with around 100,000 miles on the clock, so again, pretty high mileage. Like the Evoque, it comes with a number of engines, but for your 10k you'll easily get a GL320, which has a 3 litre turbo diesel V6 which produces 220 brake horsepower and will get its massive frame from 0 to 60 in 9.2 seconds. It's actually built on the same platform as the M class, just stretched out in order to give it enough space for 3 rows of seats, which means it will seat 7 people. It's incredibly well equipped, as you might expect for a luxury car, with all the right driver and passenger aids you need to drive along in comfort, like automated climate control and air suspension for a smooth ride. But it's not just about luxury. Mercedes really did want to make the car useful off-road, and according to all of the reviews I could find when the car dropped, they did a great job of it, taking from their experience building the G-Class. If you compare it to its main competitor, the Audi Q7, the Audi is a road car with off-roading as a bit of an afterthought, while the GL was built to be as good good on the road as it is off the road, which I'm sure the majority of people won't ever use, but then you never use the full potential of a supercar, you still probably want one of those as well. It got a facelift in 2009 to more closely match the change in Mercedes design principles, which updated both the exteriors and interiors, and I do think it's a generally good looking SUV. On reliability, the power steering pump is known to fail, and some have had transmission problems that have led to replacements being required. Many have suffered oil leaks later in life, and the air suspension can go, which costs a fair bit to replace. It's no secret that I love a good Audi, and the first generation Audi Q7 is a bit of a beast in terms of its size, and its performance isn't too bad either, thanks to its 3-litre turbo diesel V6 that makes 241 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 7.6 seconds. I mentioned already that the Q7 isn't really an off-roader by nature, which is a shame as it was based on the Audi Pikes Peak Quattro concept car, named after the famous hill climb that Audi dominated during the 1980s. That concept was genuinely focused on being an off-roading machine, while also utilising many parts on the VW Group parts bin to make it a potential option to turn into a real car if people were interested. The suspension on it was super intelligent, and the body was fully carbon fibre to decrease weight and make it more agile off-road, plus a massive 4.2 litre twin-turbo V8 engine in the front that made 493 brake horsepower. When you consider that this was the basis for the Q7, it does make the Q7 a little bit underwhelming, but then the kinds of vehicles us car lovers want are very different to what's going to be successful in reality, and the Q7 has been a successful badge for Audi so far. On release, the Q7 was Audi's flagship SUV, all the way until the Q8 dropped in 2018. It is of course a 7-seater and shares its platform with the Touareg and Cayenne, and is a properly heavy set car, sitting between 2,205 kilograms and 2,605 kilograms, hence it's slightly less useful off-road. A strange story on these was that Nissan filed a lawsuit in 2005 against Audi for using the letter Q, as they use Q for their Infiniti lineup of cars. The lawsuit ended with the settlement that meant that Audi would only use Q for 3 models, the Q3, 5 and 7, which is interesting given the Q8. These start at around £4,000, which is a lot of car for the money, but for 10k you'll get a 2009 example in good condition with around 100,000 miles on it. In terms of reliability, it's actually quite a positive story, outside of some electrical recalls and some owners complaining about rapid tyre wear on the front. Coil packs are known to go, which is often par for the course with VW Group cars. I hope you guys are enjoying this video. If you are, a reminder, 1,000 likes for the same video again at under £5,000, and go follow me on Instagram at carswithjb, and let me know in the comments down below, what is your personal favourite SUV? I'll let you know mine at the end of the video. I've spoken about many Lexus 450h's in previous videos, but I'm not sure I've ever spoken about the RX450h, Lexus' answer to the mid-size luxury crossover SUV market, after originally being a compact luxury SUV for the first generation. This third generation RX450h came with a 3.5 litre V6 petrol engine combined with the hybrid motor that produces a combined 294 brake horsepower, which will get it from 0 to 60 in 7.6 seconds. Lexus was ahead of its time with the original RXs, as the first gen was considered to be the first ever luxury crossover SUV, and by the third generation it had cemented itself in the market as a staple luxury car. It's a bit understated, maybe because of the exteriors, but on the interiors it does come very well equipped, with the keyless entry and start, UV reducing glass, the first voice recognition system ever seen in a car in the US, heated and ventilated seats, and a bunch of other cool bits to make you feel as comfortable as possible, which were bleeding edge back when the car was released in 2008. I've never been a huge fan of the colours that Lexus uses on its interiors, but from a quality standpoint they are very, very good. Fuel efficiency was a core focus for Lexus on this car, trying to make it increasingly possible to own and drive a big car while having small car running costs, and while that isn't quite the case, over the previous generation they did manage to gain at least 20% additional fuel efficiency, which is a pretty insane jump. Plus the fact that this car is a petrol hybrid means that it is the only ULEZ compliant car on the list. Funnily enough, none of the RXs have diesel engines, mostly because Lexus didn't actually have a diesel to put in there, so to get the extra SUV torque they had to use the hybrid motor. Interesting that this has actually worked out well for them from a ULEZ perspective. These start at around the £8,000 mark at the bottom end, and for 10k we'll be looking at getting a 2010 example with high mileage still. The best thing about these is the reliability, as though batteries can be troublesome and need replacing, overall the engines are solid. The only thing to note is that the RX450h is usually used way harder than many other Lexuses, as it's a practical luxury car, unlike some of the other offerings Lexus has. For that reason, expect some issues with wear and tear on the interior and around the suspension and brakes, but outside of that you can expect the power unit to be perfect. Taking the top spot just by virtue of being the quickest SUV on the list is the BMW X6, specifically in 35D spec, which means you get a 3-litre turbo diesel inline-6 engine that puts out 281 brake horsepower, which results in a 0 to 60 time of just 6.7 seconds. Not bad at all for a mid-sized luxury crossover SUV. Theoretically, this is the first sports activity coupe, with the sloping roofline referencing the coupe style cars, but in reality it's literally based on the same platform as the X5, just with some more sloping styling. It's not to be disrespected though, as it has opened up a whole new market, with other players like Mercedes following suit with their own sports activity coupes. It's not known to be particularly good for off-roading, but it's not bad, and it's pretty performant on the roads, which is great considering that's likely where you'll be most of the time. And it sold very well, with almost 27,000 going in its first year, and it managed to gain its status not only as a luxury SUV, but as a status symbol, a signifier that you are wealthy. This was advanced by the designer song Panda, in which he obviously goes off about how the white X6 looks like a panda. The interiors on these are clearly reminiscent of BMW in the late 2000s, which means that back when they were released, reviewers were pretty savage about them being boring compared to Audis and Mercedes, but now I think they actually have aged better than their counterparts and look relatively modern considering. The same can be said for the exteriors, which don't look particularly aged considering this car is already 14 years old. These also start at the £8,000 mark, and you will still be looking at pretty high mileage examples if you're spending 10 grand, but as with all of these SUVs, they're daily drivers for people, so of course they'll have done a few miles. It seems like many owners are really happy with these, which is surprising given the known reliability issues of late 2000s BMWs. I could find plenty of potential problems, but most were electrical related, as the M57, though quite fuel and oil sensitive, has been known to be pretty reliable, particularly later on its production cycle, and actually won Engine of the Year 4 times in a row from 1999 to 2002. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. A reminder to, in the comment section down below, let me know what your favourite SUV is. I personally am a major G-Wagon fan. If I could have a G63, I would be gassed. Massive thanks to the patrons as always for their support, and to you guys as well for watching. I'll see you in the next one.
Listen.